Hi, what a day. I mean, what a video. We'll get to talk about fantastic arcade-like steampunk western shooter, an RPG dungeon crawler with some SimCity-inspired mechanics, an epic very Mass Effect-like feeling third-person action game, the best ever single-screen shoot-em-up, and finally, point-and-clicker based on the character that had over 2400 novellas written about him. So don't let me waste any more of your time, and let's jump right in. Have you ever wanted to be a cowboy? What about cowgirl? Maybe cyber or even mecha cowboy then? Yeah, me neither. Even if it would have been in a Westworld-like scenario, which by the way I loved to bits and found its story of androids gaining sentience and seeking freedom enchanting. But I'm a sucker for sci-fi, so that one may be on me. Anyway, as we've established, I wouldn't want to be a cowboy, cowgirl or cow even, and especially that it would have involved a lot of things I probably would have sucked at, like riding horses and, well, cowboying. But in a video game environment, now that's completely different story. And Wild Guns for SNES is just that. A cowboy-centric, steampunk-themed and dipped-in sci-fi shooter conceptually similar to classic arcade game Cabal, but looking, feeling and playing much better. Since Wild Guns is a very arcade-like release, its story is rather short, simple and gets you straight into action. And that's exactly why we're gonna cover it first. Wild Guns follows Annie and Clint, a pair of, well, Wild Guns. There were not always Wild Guns, however, at least not Annie, as she was once a wife and a mother. But since her husband and kids were killed, she did what every good sentient android in Westworld would, so armed herself to her animatronic teeth, hired a bounty hunter Clint as her sidekick/backup, and embarked on a bloody and bazillions of bullets-fueled quest of revenge. In the simplest of terms, Wild Guns could be described as a shooting gallery type of a game in the Wild West setting, with some steampunk and sci-fi themes incorporated into its design and gameplay. So you play as Annie, or Clint, or both of them if you have someone with you, or particularly agile feet and fast-working brain, and you shoot your way through 6 enemies-filled levels, each split into 2 standard stages, followed by a boss fight. Bosses require a bit more skill to pull down than regular enemies do, but doing so is also much more satisfying. It naturally goes without saying that Wild Guns peaks in terms of fun when played with a friend, and especially that when there are 2 people playing, the enemy shots are split between them and it's just easier to deal with all the on-screen chaos. Shooting requires your character to remain stationary, so to jump, dive or roll to evade enemy shots, you'll need to holster your pew-pew-pewer first. It may feel a bit troublesome, but it adds to the strategic layer of co-op, and truth be told, is caused by SNES's controller. It's worth pointing out though that the enemy bullets can be shot down same way enemies can, so if you're good enough at aiming with SNES's simple D-pad, that's a viable strategy for constant shooting and not jumping out of the way of incoming shots too. I'm not, so while the option's there, I always somehow ended up tanking the shots with my head, chest or aside, whether I wanted to or not. And well, tanking is a big word for getting shot. It's worth to try though, shot down the enemy bullets that is, as each successful shot fills the gauge at the bottom of the screen by a little, and when it's full, you become invincible for a short while and get a Vulcan cannon, the most powerful weapon in the entire game. Kinda like Vulcan logic is the most powerful tool when facing pages upon pages of more and more demanding sudokus or crossword puzzles. Fact. Some enemies will throw dynamite at you, but you can throw it back and you can even use your lasso to temporarily stun them. As in most arcade-like games though, you also get to use screen clearing/height saving bombs, but you can only carry up to 5 of them at once. So when you're fully stock up and uncover another one in an enemy drop, it's good to give yourself a breather by using one of those that you have already to wipe all the trash off the screen before picking it up. Weapon upgrades such as shotguns or machine guns drop from certain defeated enemies and they're naturally a huge help, increasing either your firing speed or damage. Or both. I'm sure that given the footage running in the background, I don't have to tell you how beautiful looking, animating and sounding Wild Guns is. But the steampunk classic theme that it went for, along with the omnipresent explosions, countless enemies and an orgy of bullets, look truly spectacular when in motion and leave a lasting impression, at least on me. It's worth noting too that most objects on the screen can be destroyed, and that kind of attention to detail, while unnecessary, is a very nice touch and a proof how much care was given to the game during its development. Wild Guns did not reinvent the wheel, did not discover fire, electricity, or even inspire anyone to write a poem about Burger King's fries' superiority over those from McD's. It did, however, polish up the Cabal's formula so well that it's easily one of the best shooters of its niche subgenre ever made. And if you enjoy this, and in an ideal world have someone to play it with too, you'll have a truly great time. Darklands is a steampunk fantasy action role-playing taking place in mostly randomly generated dungeons, which is fantastic because it means that the replayability of it is superb. But is it really? Well, let's find out, as soon as we learn all that there is about its plot. Darkcloud takes place in the world that is divided in two, the eastern and western continents. First, very advanced, inventing and using all the tech for the betterment of its citizens, often against better judgment and their will. And second, lives in harmony with nature, coexisting peacefully with animals and spirits. Many strong spirits, but some occasional bears were welcome in the west too. And 400 years before our game starts, the two nations were consumed by a long and devastating war that left the entire world in ruin. 400 years is a lot though, and plenty enough for people to rebuild. And so they did, and lived in idle harmony with each other ever since. Well, that is until Colonel Gilgister of the East, a terrible name if you ask me, decided that he would be much better off as a ruler of the entire world rather than just a leader of a small army. So he awakens a legendary evil genie, whom he aims to use to do just that, starting with the invasion of the West. And let me tell you, that genie was a boss. The way he went through the West causing mayhem and destruction was truly something book-worthy. A terrible history book perhaps, but one nonetheless. You play as Stone, a young lone survivor of one of the genie's attacks and the only person to bear witness of the devastation that left behind to tell the tale of these atrocities. Soon after the terrible event, you are approached by the Fairy King, who gives you a magical stone built at La Milla and sends you on a mission to restore your village. But as you go about that, it becomes clear that you'll need to do much more. So you will embark on a quest to form a party of braves and defeat the evil genie once and for all the while restoring the West Kingdom to its former glory one village at a time. The gameplay revolves around traveling between destroyed by the genie villages, rebuilding them and fulfilling villagers' additional requests, which will more often than not have you scour the dungeons related to said village, seek special items and defeat all the evil within them. In dungeons you get to find and recover so-called Atla, which are these magical items that can be used to rebuild the world outside of them. These destroyed villages, if that wasn't clear enough. As they are recovered, bit by bit, they become more and more teeming with life, with villagers becoming friendlier and just appearing in and around settlements as the de facto reward for your efforts. Each of the 5 characters that join town, and you will get to control all of them no less, use their own kinds of weapons with unique to them abilities. All of the characters also have their own special traversal skills that allow them to reach particular parts of dungeons that others cannot. Interestingly enough, in Darkcloud, it's not the characters that level up upon defeating monsters, but weapons. They gain so-called absorption points with each kill, and when a certain number of this is reached, the weapon can be leveled up. The weapons can also have stat-increasing items attached to them, but only few of them can be connected to one weapon at a time. That said, they are absorbed by the weapon upon level up, freeing their slot for the next round of leveling that's to come after. A maximum level that the weapon can reach is the 5th, but upon reaching it, the weapon can be transformed into so-called Synth Sphere, which carries 60% of the weapon's final power and attributes, and can be attached to a new one, making it considerably stronger from the get-go. It's an interesting and sort of rolling mechanic that allows for a fun and satisfying progression that's unlike the ones usually found in RPGs. The characters don't level up, but can have their health, defense and water meter increased by consumption of particular items. Combat is real-time and action-focused and very hack-and-slashy feeling for the lack of a better word. From time to time, other than the standard battles, you'll get to duel an enemy, and these are series of fun quick-time events, which while totally unnecessary, provide for a nice change of pace and keep the game feeling fresh. Characters have health and thirst meters in dungeons, with that second gradually decreasing over time and having to be kept positive during dungeoneering, by either drinking or stepping into pools of water. Many of these random dungeons have the option of entering through a separate backdoor area, which features more challenging monsters to beat, but also better rewards for doing so. Darkcloud is truly one-of-a-kind game. With its SimCity-like village rebuilding mechanics, randomly generated challenges and weapon-based progression, it stands tall above all other normie RPGs of its time and offers experience unlike anything that you're used to. It's definitely worth a playthrough. Advent Rising is a third-person shooter and one of the most overlooked and forgotten OG Xbox games ever made. Which is a shame, as it's pretty darn cool, and not only because its script was written by Orson Scott Card and Cameron Dayton, so well-known and iconic sci-fi authors. In fact, there were even plans for Orson Scott Card to write series of novel tie-ins for the game and its 2 planned sequels, but given how the original never sold more than 17 units, all of that was scrapped. And it's a shame. I mean, sure, the game was a bit buggy and controls required a little bit of practice and getting used to, but that surely shouldn't have been the basis for its terrible sales results. Because if it was, then no Bethesda game should ever sell. I mean, they're like Swiss cheeses of gaming, so way more holes than cheese. Advent Rising is set in a distant future. Plenty far off for us to be comfortable zooming between the star systems, but not far enough to have evolved into differently looking species. So no big eyes, bald heads or two toes only. We're not there yet, but we're well known across the universe at least. So you, playing as Gideon With, are escorting a group of ambassadors for a meeting with a peaceful alien race called Aurelians. As it turns out, they seem to know much more about us than we do. They treat us as some kind of mythically gifted beings and tell us that they've came to warn us about the Seekers, another alien species, but one that's bent on eradicating all human life. Probably because of our good looks, mouth-watering cuisine and mastery in sarcasm and cringe. Shortly after the meeting concludes, the space station where it was held is attacked by the Seekers and you barely manage to save yourself living in an escape pod. Because that's how courageous you were in that part of backstory. The pod lands safely on the planet Edumea, which is a first stop on your way to greatness, adventure and a whole lot of ass-whoopery that you'll be serving to the Seekers very soon. For the most part, Advent Rising is deep, excellent written, third-person action adventure shooter with a very enjoyable bullet spewing mechanic, terrible flick targeting system, which is more pain in the ass than the most other similar competing solutions, jittery camera that's bound to give you a mild case of motion sickness or a severe one of it being a pain in the balls, and a rather fun, Jedi-like feeling superpowers. They are upgradable and equipable, because yes, in a weird choice by the devs, the powers have to be equipped to be used. But whatever. As odd as it may sound, you can do it on the fly, they are fun to use, and it's really a non-issue. And especially that Advent Rising is one of the very few games of the time and kind that felt non-repetitive. The action is non-stop, and you run around doing different things. Fighting numerous bodies, controlling vehicles, turrets, spaceships even, you'll battle giants, tackle the enemies in low-gravity environments, and even in one level, escape a falling down huge-ass spaceship. It's incredibly dynamic, and you'll hardly get a moment of a breather among all the action. You gain experience at 3 disciplines separately and their human weapons, alien weapons and inner powers, and they are raised by using them effectively. Weapons and powers are raised separately and each has 5 levels of upgrades, with each consecutive level improving its power or efficiency. Advent Rising was a hella ambitious title, one of truly epic proportions, and one that with a bit of luck could have been the next Mass Effect, or the first Mass Effect as it actually released before it. It could, but it wasn't. It's hard to tell why. Was it a combination of all these small issues that I mentioned? Bad timing, damaging reviews, or just one of those things that happen and have no explanation, like a random onset diarrhea? Hard to tell, but it's definitely a game that's worth experiencing at least once, even if it's today, over 20 years after it originally released. Warblade is the best single-screen / vertically scrolling shoot-em-up ever made. Period. Fact. True. And all the other words that would effectively highlight how absolute and correct the statement is. And yes, you can decide to be wrong and disagree. But why do that before you even let me finish talking about it and watch some of its footage? I mean, there's no harm in wasting just a few minutes here, right? In the best case, you'll find me being in the wrong and will be able to accurately point out my faults and mistakes in the comments. But even if the chances are slim and you don't believe it possible, what if I'm actually right and Warblade truly is the best? Give it a chance, because you may be very well learning about your soon-to-be new favorite game. So let's do it. I feel that I need to give you a little bit of a background, a couple, maybe 2-3 sentences at most, about Warblade's history before I give you any details. So originally, in the mid-90s in fact, it was released by its sole developer, Mr. Edgar M. Vigdal, on the Amiga Deluxe Galaga. And it was a modernization of a popular decade-before arcade game, going by the same name. Well, short of that Deluxe they're plastered next to its name. And it was one of the most hidden gem hits on that system that hardly anyone knew, and those that did loved it to bits. Warblade is nearly the same game, ported in 2003 to PC 1-to-1 with some notable visual and content upgrades, and also a title upon which Edgar began working on a follow-up, Warblade 2. Sadly he passed away in 2015, leaving the game unfinished, and since he was a very particular kind of a programmer, no one could really follow his code, so any chances of Warblade 2 releasing to honor his years of achievements is gone forever. So, Warblade is this single-screen, stage and waves-based shoot-em-up conceptually following the idea originated by arcade hit Galaga, but heavily expanded upon. It comes with a whopping 100 levels of action-packed explosive fun, divided into 25 level-strong chunks, each of them ending with a huge boss fight. These usually took a large part of the screen, had their own unique repeatable movement and attack patterns, and additional mechanics. They were not only super fun to beat, but also to fail at, learning how to best them in consecutive playthroughs. Regular levels are grouped in threes, first to introducing the new enemy ships, their design and behavioral mechanics, and third adding a larger version of these enemies to the mix, the so-called mothers. Well, my buddies and I used to call them mothers back in the day, but whether they really were is another case entirely. They were identical looking, but bigger, stronger and faster versions of basic alien grunts and dropped rank markers upon destruction. So even if they were not mothers per se, they were definitely special. Since we're on those rank markers, they allow you to get promoted, which is then later on reflected in the high score boards. So while they may be superficial ranks only, they do kinda reflect your skill at the game. And showing a lieutenant buddy of yours your admiral mark on the high score board is to make it pretty clear which one of you two was an amazing, super cool, god-tier gamer and keyboard assassin, and which had a life and a girlfriend. After each group of 3 standard levels, there's always an extra point scoring stage before the shop. And it can either be a regular bonus level, in which you earn extra points and bonus drops from a wave of unarmed enemies, or a so-called kamikaze stage, which hurls groups of enemies straight at you from above in a kamikaze-like dive, and you can either try to kill them all for extra points and drops, or avoid. They are deadly though, so unlike the regular bonus stage, require a bit more care and attention. All of that is always followed by a shop before the cycle repeats with new and more dangerous enemies. There are a lot of different things that you can buy in the shop, using coins dropping occasionally from defeated enemies, starting with extra speed and bullets, through many unique and powerful weapons, shields and even rank markers and secrets. Because yes, Warblade has secrets, and yes, if you knew them, well, at least some of them, you could do considerably better in the consecutive playthroughs. Sure, some of them are quite obvious, like not picking up of skull item drops, as these either reduce your weapon to a lower tier or do other nasty things. But other secrets are considerably more useful, explaining different hidden gameplay mechanics or even pointing out in which order to actually pick up colored skull drops to get a super good bonus. That is the case too. The enemies always enter the screen in a preset and static per each level pattern of arrival and follow the pre-arranged attacks and movements after, which means that memorization is a big part of doing well in Warblade, and that very often the very moment that they are flying onto the screen is the best time to quickly score a lot of points and drops. And these pickups can be both positive and negative. Speed ups, speed downs, extra bullets for basic weapons and a shield are the most common of them all, but there are also few that are far more interesting. And these can either earn you huge bonuses, give you tons of ranks, money, or all of these combined, and they deserve a mention. Let's start with the memory station that instantly moves you to its board, completing the stage you were in automatically. It's a glorified game of memory in which you need to identify pairs of identical bonuses to activate them in a given time. It's the simplest of all the extra pickups, but one that's also more often than not still worth taking. Then there is the gem bomb, which upon picking up instantly explodes all the enemies that are on the screen, turning them into gems. And don't worry, we'll get to gems soon. Money Bomb does the same, but instead of gems, each enemy is turned into a money coin of different value, so it's best to have this pickup spawn when there's a lot of bodies on the screen. Not that you have any choice, but it's definitely good to keep that in mind. Meteor Storm is my most favorite out of all bonus pickups, as it moves you straight into this vertical scrolling Meteor Storm stage, in which countless rocks are heading away and you must navigate between them, surviving and getting to the very end. Points and money mix with them occasionally, so it's good to keep your fingers on the keys and eyes wide open. When you survive through it all, a large point and money bonus awaits for you at the very end. But, and that's really important, the bonus is dependent on the average speed you were moving between these rocks and calculated based on the last 15 seconds. So if you complete it with 100% speed average, the rewards are plenty enough to arm yourself to the point of being nearly enough to get you through the entire rest of the game. In other words, when you reach the last quarter of the length of Meteor Storm, it's good to speed up considerably and hope to not hit anything on your way to the finish line. Another fun minigame is the so-called gem drop, which you don't enter by grabbing any drops, but by collecting 100 gems throughout your regular gameplay. And when you do, you are transported into a Meteor Storm-like minigame, with a difference that instead of meteors, only gems drop in it, and they are worth a lot of points. And if somehow, I don't know how, but if you give it your best and manage to grab 1000 of these gems, a super gem drop minigame is activated, which is mechanically identical, but each gem is worth 20 times its usual point score. It's good to know about that last, but don't expect to see it often. Through years of playing Warblade, I myself maybe saw it a handful of times, so, you know, it may or may not happen. Warblade is an endless score type of a game, so if you keep playing and not failing, even if you complete all of its levels, it will circle back to the beginning and carry on from the first stage at an increased difficulty, letting you score more and more. Well, until you eventually make a mistake or get too tired and fail. Which means that if you're proficient at it and you have a good run, you may end up completing the entire shebang 2-3 times in one run, stacking up truly gigantic points. And in the same time, if you're unlucky with RNG or make a mistake in one of the early stages, you may very well not even fight your way to the first boss. Warblade is a fantastic shooter that demands focus and attention, but also one that rewards memorization and most importantly skill. So, now, when we most definitely agree that it's the best single-screen shooter ever made, you can feel free to jump into the comments and tell me that I was right. Or to still disagree, because that's always an option too. Let me start by saying that I've not read a single of over 2,400 individual sci-fi novellas about Perry Rhodan, an immortal Emperor of Earth. Yup, the character that the Immortals of Terra is based on has been a subject of countless writings and has been alive in hearts of fans for much longer than I've walked the Earth for. For numerous decades longer, in fact. And you gotta give credit where it's due, devs sure managed to pull hell of a game given the mountains worth of source material that they had to base it on. For all intents and purposes, the Immortals of Terra, a Perry Rhodan adventure, is just your standard sci-fi point-and-click game, and what's more, one following an oldest-time tale of boy saves girl. One could say that it's stale, and by now not worth rehashing for the nth time concept, as we've all been down that beaten road countless times to date, and we know what's awaiting us at the very end. But I disagree. A good story is a good story, regardless of the premise. I mean, how often when watching a movie you've managed to figure out how it will end in the first 15-20 minutes? Exactly. There's been too many instances to count, and yet you still sat through it and had a lot of fun. Same here. You know what it's all about, you know it has to culminate with a happy end, and you love every minute getting to it. The game starts in the year 4394 AD on a planet world known as Terrania, which happens to house Solar Residence, a seat of power for the Terranian government. And it starts with a bang, a literal one too, as the Solar Residence is suddenly and unexpectedly attacked by unknown assailants that happen to be an army of deadly robots. While the attack is stopped by Perry Rhodan, the 3,000 years old regent of Terrania, there are still consequences, and quite dire to our protagonist too. For one, the destruction left by the robots is considerable, and for two, and more importantly too, it appears that Mondra Diamond, our hero's love interest and mother of their child, was kidnapped in the attack. Now, if there's one thing gaming taught me, is that you do not mess, like ever, and you better write that down, with a being that's immortal and timeless. Because sooner or later, it will find a way to track you down and enact its revenge. And Perry Rhodan is all three: immortal, timeless, and pissed. Even if Immortals of Terra don't require to be familiar with any of the books in the long-running series of German sci-fi, I feel that some experience with them would be beneficial. Because many, if not most of the characters that you will interact with, feel unlike those found in most other adventure games. So they are not only these superficial lamppost types of characters that just stand in one place and are only there to serve you your next clue or answer a few questions that will push your story forward. I mean, they will do all that, but even without any prior knowledge in Perryverse, you can easily tell based on the dialogues with them and their behavior that they are well-established, deep and full-fledged personas and not just quote-unquote point at which you stop for your next clue. So talking to them, even if at times leaving you feeling a bit at loss for context, will most importantly also appear to be very lifelike. Which, let me tell you, is very fresh for a point-and-clicker. What's more, the puzzles that you will encounter throughout your 5-chapter-strong adventure, with each chapter set in a completely different location, will never be there just to stopgap you either. All of them nicely play into the plot, being a logical consequence of your actions and choices, and never serving as an artificial gameplay lengthener. I know, no such word, but you know what I mean by it. You're smart. Well, you're not Perry perhaps, with thousands of years worth of experience, but you're definitely keener than your average gamer. I'm sure of it. You're here after all. Anyway, another unusual thing about Immortals of Terra is its unique inventory system, which is not used to only hold items, but also abstract concepts that can be used in puzzling or conversations. So subjects you learn about during dialogues with NPCs, persons of interest, and even things and places you've seen. And they are all represented by easily recognizable and obvious icons. At first it may feel a bit weird and odd to wrap your head around concept to have all of these items with you, but after an hour or so, you won't even think about it and you'll be well used to it all. Immortals of Terra is easily one of the most unique and overlooked adventuring experiences of the last 20 years. It's part sci-fi epic story, part detective mystery, and part traditional tale as old as time, told by tried and tested point-and-clicking mechanics. It's a perfect game for the weekend, as it's not too long, taking 8 to 10 hours at most, and in the same time very satisfying to both click your way through and complete. If you get a chance, do try it out. I really enjoyed today's selection and I hope that you did too. So make sure to let me know what you think of them in the comments below. And if you could click those like, sub and bell icons too, for YouTube to let you know when I release something new. It would help the channel grow and I would be forever grateful to you. So take care of yourself, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.